here. First, IB for All, Closing Gaps in a Caring Community and Culture. And the costs that are over here, these are fully loaded costs, by the way, so those include benefits as well. But our first investment that we would like to make in the schools is an additional International Baccalaureate Middle Years Program Coordinator. Currently, we have one coordinator in our middle and high school that runs between the two buildings and has responsibility for 5 grade levels of students because the MYP program is grades 6 through 10, excuse me. And what we know is that the premier International Baccalaureate school divisions have an MYP coordinator in the high school and in the middle school, and now we know why. The amount of work that is required of that MYP coordinator to do units of study, to do planning, curriculum development, and professional development for the teachers that they're working with at both the middle and high school for one person is just too much. So we really feel like it's important to support and supplement our IB program if we're truly going to be the most premier in the United States and even in the world by adding a coordinator that will really help. There's also something else that's happening in the next year and 2 years really, is that there is a reauthorization that's going on with IB. And so IB is going to come in and they're going to reauthorize our schools. So this MYP coordinator addition will help us with that, that reauthorization. The second thing that we really want to do that invests in our future is, and this goes to closing the gap. So when I shared those SOL data at the beginning, one of the things that I said is we have some populations of our students that don't do as well as the vast majority of our kids, is looking at particularly English language arts, reading and writing. If you look at our data over time, just in the full picture, what we see is that there are declines year over year. Very small, but over time those will create some real issues for us if we don't get in front of them. Additionally, we have a number of our students who are struggling in reading and writing. And we have seen on the flip side of that, by adding a mathematics coordinator the last 2 years, some real incredible gains across our system in mathematics because we're looking at how we teach. We look at professional development and learning. We talk about differentiation and scaffolding learning for students. But we would anticipate that this English language arts coordinator would be able to embed themselves in schools, work with teachers, develop structures and strategies to work with our young middle and high school readers and writers to help support their learning going forward. The primary mission of this person would be to develop our staff, to build capacity, and help us ultimately serve each of our students well in the area of reading, writing, and language arts. The third investment is in a social worker. We do have several social emotional needs in our community. And we, again, are exceeding in our staffing of school counselors. We staff more than what the required ratios are from the state of Virginia. We also have a significant number of social workers already, but we think that by adding one more social worker will really round us out in the realm of social work and be able to address some of the social emotional needs in a more connected and holistic fashion, because social workers are really great at working with families and family units. And so this additional social worker will help us get to some of those social emotional needs a little bit more nimbly than perhaps in the past. The next investment is some contract length adjustments. This is sort of a, I don't want to say cleanup, but in some ways it's sort of taking care of some things that, and it's a smaller number, 63,000, some things that are misaligned, and that kind of brings us into alignment. So an example of that is the director of preschool is an 11-month employee, but the preschool is open for 12 months. So we really need to have a 12-month employee at the preschool. We have a program at our middle school for students that might be outplaced for day treatment, and we're trying to keep our students here in the City of Falls Church and serve them. That coordinator of that program is 10 months and really should probably be 11 months because they work through the summer writing IEPs and the like. So doing some of those contract adjustments will be $63,000. At Jessie Thackeray, we have a part-time clinic and part-time office support person, and we're suggesting in our budget that we make that person full-time. Right now, when that person leaves, the director of the preschool is the person who's answering the phones and handing out bags of ice and taking care of kids that way, which is, part of the job, all other duties as assigned. But we really want that director of preschool in classrooms working with teachers and working with kids. And then the last item in here for building for our future is custodial support. That line item is we're adding 100,000 square feet to our high school. So we have some additional custodial needs. So that represents 3 additional custodial positions that would go into the high school. So the total cost for these investments into our future and our goals is $540,000. So some other things that we're looking at to capture some revenue to help all of this balance is that we are looking at salary lapse, and that is when an employee leaves, and let's say I were a 20-year veteran in the system and I decided that I wanted to go to another system after being here for 20 years, and we hire behind that person, and the person we hire is a 5-year teacher, we would have some savings in that salary line. So when we look at our salary lapse, we do have some savings there. We also have some savings in our other employee benefits. We know that our actuarial liability for our retiree health care is actually going to come down $27,000. We're going to save about $44,000 in a transitional retirement plan that was in place from 2002, 2003. And then we also recognize about $31,000 in savings from FICA. So when you take all of that together, we get real close to our balancing of our budget, and I'll share that in the next couple of slides. But before I do that, there are some things that we would like to look at if some one-time money became available. And these monies or these dollars would happen, for example, that year-end balance that we carry forward. If we wanted to spend some of that, we could spend some of that on one-time money. We wouldn't want it to be reoccurring. So these would be reoccurring one-time purchases if we had some extra money. The first is some additional custodial support, and this is really materials and supplies for custodians at George Mason. Replacement buses. We are trying to replace at least 2 buses a year to kind of get on or 2 buses a year, not at least. 2 buses a year to get on a replacement cycle. We did apply for some electric buses to be in that first wave from Dominion. Some of you might have heard that Dominion, Virginia is doing 50 buses across the Commonwealth. Unfortunately, or fortunately maybe, we weren't successful in that first round, but we have been told we would get some advantage, we would get a second look in the second round for electric buses, but the hope is to eventually turn over all of our buses to electric buses. But bottom line is that we do look at replacing 2 buses a year. We want to do some facilities improvements at Henderson. So at Henderson, when you come in, you go through that vestibule and then you get to the security desk. We'd like to move the security desk into the vestibule and make it a secured vestibule to help with access to the building. And then lastly, a small amount in instructional supplies for Jesse Thackeray. So those are some things that we are looking forward to hopefully funding if some extra money comes in. There are some things, like in any budget, that will go unfunded unless some extra dollars fall out. And this is an alphabetized list of some of those unfunded requests. Again, they're all tied to a goal, but in the end, when we looked at these from a systematic perspective, those things that ended up above the line were those items that we really felt like were going to have the greatest impact from a division perspective and really help us meet those three big goals. This is a cost per pupil chart that I want to share with you. And the blue line is the City of Falls Church cost per pupil year over year. The right-hand chart shows what we are in comparison with surrounding jurisdictions. And then this bottom line is the CPI line. So if you look at adjusted inflation, we do follow that line pretty closely. But the big idea here is that next year we're projected as a school division to have a cost per pupil of just over $20,000 per student. That puts us among the top in cost per pupil spending. One of the reasons that we have such a significant cost per pupil is that we have made a decision as a community that we want to maintain very small class sizes. So we're staffing our classes at 22 to 1 or 24 to 1 at the secondary level or upper elementary, versus other surrounding jurisdictions that are staffing their schools at 28, 29, and sometimes 30 to 1. If we were to staff our schools at a much higher rate, it would mean we would need less teachers, which ultimately would drive down that cost per pupil. But we've made a decision as a community to maintain low class sizes, and as a consequence, it maintains a relatively high cost per pupil. So here is a summary, and we're going to hand out to you tonight a one-page summary document that you can take with you. But in this summary, you'll see on the left-hand side the revenue, and on the right-hand side are the expenditures, and that sort of talks about all of those things that I indicated earlier, where the money's coming from and where we are proposing that it goes. And then here is the calendar of events. And right now, we're about here. So on February 3rd, there'll be a CIP presentation to the Planning Commission. On the 11th, there'll be a public hearing and a work session of the board. And then on February 18th, the school board will adopt the advertised budget. So the way it goes is there's a superintendent's proposed budget, then there's a school board adopted advertised budget. That advertised budget gets sent over to the city council, and our chair, Greg Anderson, will present the advertised budget to the city council on March 9th. Then the city manager incorporates our budget into the city's budget, and then the city council on April 27th will adopt the budget ordinance, which includes the amount that would then be transferred to the schools. And then on May 5th, the school board will come back together in case there's some additional revenue that needs to be adjusted for, and adopt finally what the ultimate budget will be. So that's our budget calendar. I do want to make sure everybody knows that all of the materials for our budget are on the website. We have a relatively large budget book. I see, Michelle, will you hold up the budget book? This budget book is all online as well, so if you want to dig in line by line to see where we are and what we're spending, we certainly welcome that. One of the things we are absolutely committed to is a transparent process through the budget, and are happy to answer any questions that you might have tonight. So with that, I will end my budget presentation, take questions, and then if there are anything else, we're happy to stand around and talk. So there you have it. Yes, ma'am.
I have kind of a micro question.
Okay.
So when you're looking at you mentioned that for your positions as teachers, there's generally like 9 applicants.
Yes.
Do you do any type of extra outreach or things to increase the possible minority representation among the applicants?
That's a great question. I'm going to repeat it just so we have it on record as well. So the question was, what do we do to increase our outreach so that we can increase our minority applicants to the system? We recently, well, there's a couple of things. I'll back up. When I came in a couple of years ago, one of the things that we really wanted to spend some time doing was looking at exactly that, how we could increase diversity in our teacher ranks and across the system. So we started working with our Human Resources Department and asking them, what kind of recruitment fairs do we go to, where do we go, and the like. And so we established a goal for ourselves as part of the triennial plan to get out to historically black colleges and universities, and then working more closely with our teaching partners around the area, so universities that have teacher ed programs, and working with them as well. So that was sort of a starting point, but I would say in some ways it was sort of a pebble in the pond. So as we continue our journey, we recently had an equity report done by Dr. Julian Williams from George Mason University. One of the things that he suggested is we need to have a more comprehensive plan. And so we're working through what that comprehensive plan looks like. But one of the things we know from the data is that who goes to some of those fairs and who represents us as a system is really important. And so making sure that we have the right recruiting team on site, making sure we not only get to the right places, but making sure we get the right people there. The other thing that I think is going to help us in the short term and hopefully in the long term is that Virginia passed a law last year that now allows for universities to do a 4-year teacher education program. So now colleges and universities can graduate seniors that can walk into